Thank you very much for this opportunity to come here today and talk a little bit about Veterans Park and Athletic Complex. Exploring history luncheons are a great thing. History is one of my favorite topics, and particularly the older I get, the more important it seems to be. But so thank you for doing this and keeping this forefront and keeping these topics alive and expanding on them. I'd like to start off by recognizing our city council members that are here. Linda Harvell, who has been here for much of the city's history, throughout the history. And Elizabeth Kuna, back here. Elizabeth was on the Parks and Recreation Board and helped with some of the things that the parks are known for now. And our newest council member, William Wright. And over the years, we've been blessed with having good people on our city councils, on our boards and advisory committees, and they have the right heart for doing the best for the citizens of College Station, and that's reflected in our community today. It's because of all those people that volunteer to go do those things at no cost, and they do it for free. A lot of people don't know that, but it's a tremendous service, and we thank you for that. I'd also like to recognize our veterans that are here, and I'm going to start, and I just realized that Joe Ferrari is here, and a World War II veteran, and so that's a national treasure that we have here today. Joe Ferrari. And I'd like any other veteran to please stand and be recognized. Thank you for all your service, and now I'd like any family members that have veterans or active duty to please stand and be recognized. Thank you very much for that. So any veterans knows that the family is a foundation of everything that they do and what they are there for. The topic is Veterans Park and Athletic Complex. And the way I describe this place, and to me it's a special place, it's a sacred place, is it's the place where duty, honor, and country meet the pursuit of happiness. So stop and think about that. All veterans from any era, any branch of service, have that commonality that they're there for duty, honor, and country. And the park is a place where you pursue happiness. So that's where they come together. The mission of the Brazos Valley Veterans Memorial is very simple. It's to take a proactive role in honoring all veterans who have served in the uniformed services of the United States. Very simple. Wartime, peacetime, any branch of service, Army, Navy, Air Force, Marine Corps, Coast Guard, Space Force now, Merchant Marine from World War II, and also recognized by act of Congress as veterans of the United States or Confederate soldiers, all uniformed members of the Public Health Service, and uniformed members of the National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Administration. I didn't know that until just a few years ago, but they are. They're recognized by Congress, so that's who a veteran is. Okay, where are we? Well, if you look down here, you see a little red dot. That's Larry Ringer Library. That's where we are right now. This is kind of a big picture here. Veterans Park's the circle up there that you see. To the left of it's another red dot, and that's the home site of the person that originally owned the land where Veterans Park is. His name was Richard Carter, and so that's part of the Richard Carter League. And Richard Carter's name is actually on the wall out there at the memorial. It was put on back in 2012, because he was a veteran of the War of 1812. And so we remembered his service at that time. The other red dot is A&M Methodist Church, where I go, and I was doing this presentation earlier this month, and so I put that red dot on there as well. And then I couldn't figure out how to get it off there. To give you a little bit about my background, I was born in Dallas, Texas. Moved to Abilene, Texas when I was 3 years old with my family. My dad worked out at Dyess Air Force Base. He was a World War II veteran in the Army, never left the States. Later on was in the Air Force Reserve, worked out at Dyess Air Force Base. And I graduated from Abilene Cooper in 1965. My family picked up and moved to Colorado the next week. I took the bus to A&M. The only reason I wanted to go to A&M because I'd known about it for a long time from some of my family friends. Their name were Gatlin, Carly Gatlin and Beth Gatlin. Some of you may have known them. And they're buried in the College Station Cemetery. Mr. Gatlin had been mayor of Abilene at one time, but we were good friends. They moved back here. He was an Aggie, and his son-in-law was a guy named Jim Earl. And any of you remember Jim Earl used to write the Cadet Slouch deal, and he was, so anyway, that's how I come to be interested in A&M. I took that bus, and it was about a 10-hour bus ride from Abilene to College Station. It went through Fort Worth. I don't know where all we went, but I got off the bus. I was 17 years old and had my little bag and looked and said, well, I guess I got to head over that way. And so I reported in, and there was, process back then that you went through to enroll. And first thing they asked in 1965 was, do you want to be in the Corps or you want to be a civilian? I said, well, I want to be in the Corps. That's the only reason I came. And said, all right, you go this way. So we get over a little bit further down this line. They said, do you want to be Army or Air Force? I said, oh man, I hadn't even thought about that. I said, well, my dad was Air Force. My brother was Navy. I'll go in the Army. All right, so we got that. I'm making progress now. So they go a little bit further down the line and they said, what do you want to major in? I said, I just want to be in the Corps. Well, so you got to major in something. I said, can't I just be in the Corps? And said, no, you got to major in something. So I said, well, dang, wildlife science. That sounds like hunting and fishing and going outdoors and camping. And I'll do that. Well, I didn't know that you had to take chemistry and some other stuff. That didn't work out very well. But so we go on down this trail now. I'm in the College of Agriculture, Wildlife Science major, Army. Come to this next question, and this was a life-changing event. And at the time, I didn't know it was, but it was. They said, do you want air-conditioned or non-air-conditioned dorm? And this was something new to me because we didn't have air conditioning in Abilene. And so how much is it? I said, it was $50 a semester. I said, no, I don't have $50 a semester. No, that's out of the question. Non-air conditioning, okay. You're in company B2. Okay, if I had chose air conditioning, I wouldn't be here today because I would have ended up somewhere else. But since I did, I was in company B2, and I met my good buddies, one of which had this really cute little cousin that lived over at Chapel Hill, and it was an arranged thing. I just found out later on, of course. So we ended up getting married, and everything worked out great. But the way it worked is back then I graduated in January of '70 because I was not a good student. I had to have 22 hours to graduate, and that was a stretch for me because I, like I say, wasn't a good student. But anyhow, with help, I got through. I graduated Saturday morning, got commissioned in the Army Saturday afternoon. Mary Alice and I got married Sunday night over in Chapel Hill in a little Methodist church. The rest is history. And so I credit that with much of my success there. And having met Mary Alice, and we've been married all these years. And So, but if I hadn't chose non-air conditioning, I would have been in Spider D. And I don't know who I would have met. It wouldn't have been good. So thank the Lord. Little backstory there. All right. Let me get this thing going. Little history here on the park. 150 acres. Back in the early 90s, there was a lot of discussion and questions and public demand for more athletic fields in College Station, specifically soccer and softball. Soccer was on the rise. Of course, back when it started, we didn't even know what soccer was. We'd heard about it, didn't know what it was. But anyway, there was a lot of demand for soccer and softball. They were outgrowing, the city's growing, teams were coming up, needed more facilities. Parks and Recreation Board became very active in that, said we need to get a place where we can put a bunch of fields together, have a site where you can do tournaments, do all your league play, all in one location, need a big site, and needs to have good road access away from neighborhoods, and something you can develop easily. Excuse me. So bond committee was put together, as usually are. The bond committee allocated $1 million to buy an athletic park. Park board came back, told the council $1 million is not going to work. That's not going to get the job done. It needs to be at least $1.5 million. We need 100 to 150 acres. Need $1.5 million. So Park Board Chairman Ron Gay went forward and led that charge to the council, and council agreed. So in 1998, the bond issue for $1.5 million went to the voters and was approved to buy land for an athletic park. So it was originally part of the Richard Carter League. We bought it from the old Burt Wheeler estate there next to what is the old TI building, which I'm sure all of you know. And that it was bought for $1.5 million. And actually it was 153 acres. There's a little Mar Ice Center there right off University Drive. If you noticed that, there's a little. The reason that's there is we had $1.5 million. It was $10,000 an acre. It was 153 acres. So we were 35,000 short. And back then that was a lot of money. So they carved that out. They wouldn't just toss it in. The other backstory is that was a joint project with the city of Bryan in Bryan Development, because there was a guy named Bill Lero, and he was trying to put together a deal to develop the land on the north side of University Drive in Bryan, and the Burt Wheeler estate owned all of that, and they wanted to sell everything at once. We didn't have any use or money for the part on that side. He didn't have money or use for the part on our side. He came and said, hey, would you be willing to do a joint deal? We said, yeah. So that's what we ended up doing. So the behind the scenes story was that park acquisition was actually kind of a joint project between us and Bryan to get that area developed, and it turned out very well. Well, City Council approved a park master plan for the park with soccer fields and softball fields and all of that type of thing. In the meantime, our mayor-elect, who was our chairman of our Parks and Recreation Board, we were trying to figure out, what are we going to call this park? Do we want to call it park number 51 or whatever? Trying to come up with an idea. So we need to identify this park, something that will make it known. And so during those discussions, John Nichols came up. He said, why don't we name it for something related to veterans? So they really kind of perked up. The committee said, that's a great idea. And from that, Veterans Park and Athletic Complex came to be the name for the park. That changed everything. That's another example of one idea that really changed everything. We didn't know it at that time to the extent that it would, but it did. So we go on in 2002, the Brazos Valley Veterans Memorial was dedicated as a joint project of many groups, American Legion, VFW, Arts Council, City of Bryan, City College Station, Brazos County, numerous private donors. And to date, it's become, it's a major venue for sports tourism now, and teams, soccer teams, softball, flag football, Special Olympics, all kinds of people come into this site, and it's been very successful from that standpoint. The park is totally owned by the City of College Station, including the memorial, and the goal for the memorial itself is to have all of our sites completed along the history trail by 2026. And I must mention at this time, there is a test at the end of this deal. There'll be a test, and there will be homework. Okay, those two things. So don't, I see some of you aren't taking notes. All right, this is an aerial picture of the park, and if you see the area lined in red, up there is that's the 12 acres that's dedicated to the memorial. And you see the softball and soccer fields and all that. All of those facilities out there have a name associated with veterans. In other words, Army Field, Air Force Field, Navy Field, etc. The 5-field softball complex, the building there in the middle, of course, it's a 5-sided building. It's the Pentagon. And it is dedicated in honor of those who died on September 11th. And a survivor from that attack was there. And when we dedicated it and had the very first tournament, he threw out the first pitch at the girls' first softball tournament we ever had out there and said a few words. So that everything out there is dedicated to something related to veterans. There's a walking trail that goes around those 6 softball fields. And I must recognize Ann Boykin, who over here was involved in much of what I'm going to be talking about. But she helped work with the Historic Preservation Committee in coming up with all the all the little markers on that American Mile. Yes, Kathy?
Steve, I can't figure out, where is the Veterans Pavilion out there?
The American Pavilion?
Yeah.
The American Pavilion is,
Can you show me?
I can almost show you. It's right there.
Oh, okay, all right. I was just trying to figure out. Okay.
So anyway, you got the American Mile that goes around there. It's exactly 1 mile. Every 20 feet is a bunch of pavers, and it has something that happened in American history, 1776 up to almost the present. Of course, the main memorial is located on the Lewis L. Adam Memorial Plaza. We currently have 6,524 names of veterans from all eras in American history on that wall. What I like to say about those names is all those names up there, they're the first name, middle initial, last name, branch of service. There's no rank, there's no period of when they served, anything about what they did. Each of those names represents a story. Some of those stories are quite tragic, and some didn't survive, of course. But all of those stories represent somebody that put on the uniform of this country and did their part to serve our country. And all eras of American history, from the Revolutionary War up to people that are still currently serving today. First statue there is a statue of a World War II era soldier carrying a wounded comrade on his back. This is the only statue that's larger than life size. It's 1.5 times. It was done by a fellow by the name of Robert Eccleston. And Robert was he was an Army Ranger in the 10th Mountain Division out on the West Coast many years ago. And being an Army Ranger, he was out there and he kind of got to where he wanted to meet girls. So he's trying to figure out, he's a ranger, he's a smart guy. How do I meet girls? He said, well, I bet girls go to art classes. And so he told me this story. He said, so I signed up for this art class. Well, and there were girls. And he met one beautiful lady. They got married. He decided he wanted to be an artist instead of an Army Ranger. So Captain Eccleston became an artist. Backstory on this is he got 2 sets of uniform, authentic World War II boots, uniform, helmet, everything. He put on one set, his father put on the other set, and then he put his father on his back and would carry him around the room while his wife took pictures of him. So the backstory is the sculpture is actually of the artist carrying his father. And anyway, not many people know. That's a trivia question now. All right, so there's the wall. There's our veteran there. The list of veterans is available on our website at www.bvvm.org, Brazos Valley Veterans Memorial.org. And if you go in there and search around, you'll find the list. Our board member, our good board member, Tom Turbyville, who a lot of you know, took it upon himself to go out there and personally inventory every name on there, correct them on our list, and make sure everything was accurate. And then he figured out, he counted every line so that when you go to that website, it'll say so-and-so on panel A, line 23, and then you can find it. Thanks to Tom Turbyville. I can't ever thank him enough. He also has a virtual tour of this memorial that you can find on that website that's about 32 minutes long, that's excellent, and will tell a lot of the same things I'm telling you now. We always have great ceremonies out there. This was one dedicating the Gulf War site, and this were the Ross Volunteers. They always come out and perform the rifle salute for us and do an excellent job. $250 per name to go on there. That covers the cost of the engraving, the certificate, all the things that go into trying to get all that done. The deadline each year is August the 15th. Okay? It's going to be a test at the end of this. All right. And then the new names are recognized each year on Veterans Day, and they're called out. If the person's there, they're asked to stand and answer, here, First Sergeant, or whatever. If they're not there, then family or friends answers in their stead. All right. Ann Boykin over here. Everybody give her a round of applause. You recognize some of her handiwork here. She created the layout for these panels and worked with other people to come up with the information on there. We had Dr. Chip Dawson, who's on our board. He enlisted authors from A&M plus other places around the United States, and then came up with the various details on each of these. Each site is the same size, same layout, different information. And one of the things I always point out in my talks, Ann was on our Veterans Memorial Board, and at that time she was the only woman. And thank God for that. Huh? And thank God for that, because we wanted to put, in creating this, these are the war streamers, they call them. In the Department of Heraldry and Department of Defense, there's a flag, and it has every war streamer we were ever in is on that flag, and they're all very unique colors. Each one has its own unique color pattern, and they're very specific. And you know, I see that's red and white. Okay, that's great. Well, but it's a certain red, you know. And so Ann was working on this, and she came and gave a report to the board, because they're all different, and they're very, you'll see them as we go through here. But she said, you know, I'm trying to get these colors right. And finally she came in and she said, I've got the solution. And I'll guarantee you this, not a single guy on that board would have ever thought of this. And she said, we said, what is it? She said, yarn. Yarn? She said, yarn. She said, yarn has all these color patterns and specific ones that I can go in and working from that, I can backtrack and find what the color yarn was used on that, and from that I can get the exact color. Thank you, Ann. Give her a round of applause. And I'm not telling that just because she's here. I tell that every time I do this talk. But anyway, so you got the flag of the country up on one corner, a little map of where the things were. You got 500 words or less of a original historical document. You got the list of the campaigns, belligerents, images of what people and equipment may have looked like. All of these are the same for each site in format. So the first one's American Revolution. This is Liberty or Death. All of these statues along the trail are life-size bronzes by Jay Payne and Laura are local artists from Navasota, and they're meticulous in the detail that goes into each one, down to the buttons of the uniform, the clothing, the type of footwear, the weapon, any gear that they may hold is all accurately reproduced. And they're on the ground, they're not up on a mount, they're not up on a granite pedestal or anything like that, and that's intentional because we want it to where people can come up and look at them, touch them, feel them, and kind of get an idea of what these people look like. And they're not generals or admirals or anything like that. They're the regular foot soldiers, sailors, airmen, what have you. Indian wars, that's one of my favorite ones. People always talk about our longest war being Iraq, Afghanistan, 20 years or so. Indian wars went on for 100 years. And in this case, we have a Buffalo soldier, the black regiments, and for this dedication, we had reenactors from the Buffalo soldiers there, wearing their uniforms. One of them spoke. This was done on the anniversary of the formation of the 9th Cavalry Regiment, which actually occurred in New Orleans, and we did it on the exact date of that regiment's formation. 9th and 10th Cavalry were big parts of all that. So this one depicts a Buffalo soldier, and he's got his saddle, and he doesn't have his horse because that was main reason he doesn't have a horse, because that was going to be another $100,000. But so this guy, he hadn't got a horse. He got his horse shot out or something. Anyway, but we got to think about it. Indian wars, you know, it was more complicated than a lot of people thought, because Indians fought for the U.S. side as well. A lot of people don't know that, but in this case, this is a Tonkawa scout. Tonkawas were scouts for the U.S. cavalry. And Tonkawas had lived in this area. This was part of their territory. And so we had a fellow from Tonkawa, Oklahoma come down. He was the president of a Tonkawa tribe. And he gave an eloquent talk, one of the best talks we ever had. He talked about his people and what happened to his people. You know what happened to his people? They were fighting the Comanches. They were blood enemies. They were fighting the Comanches and all these others with the cavalry. And then it's all over with. The Comanches went up to Fort Sill, went to Oklahoma. You know where the Tonkawas went? They got sent there too. And so they got a bitter thank you for their service. But they are remembered in our park. And when Mr. Patterson came down representing the Tonkawa tribe, he brought a Tonkawa flag, Tonkawa tribe flag. So on Veterans Day each year, you'll see a Tonkawa tribe flag flying at this site with the U.S. flag. It's one of my favorite sites. War of 1812, I mentioned that. Don't give up the ship, Navy sailor. They didn't have much in the way of uniforms. This guy's barefoot. A lot of them were barefoot. Just got his trousers, his big hat. He's got a cutlass there, and he's got a little pistol in his belt. And he's pulling on I used to say he's pulling on a rope, but my brother's Navy said, no, that's a line. They don't have ropes, they're lines. He's pulling on a line. He's raising up the sail or doing something, and he's hollering something there, and I think he's hollering something in Navy language, so I can't repeat it, you know. Anyway, War of 1812, a lot of people don't know about that, but that was kind of like the Second American Revolution, and we could have very well lost that. There were some significant battles that were turning points on Lake Champlain that were naval battles, and had it gone the other way, you know, things might have been a little different today. But that's the next one. War for Texas Independence, another significant war. There's 17 U.S. war sites plus the Texas Independence, because we're in Texas, we include this. But that, when you think about it, that changed not only Texas history, it changed world history, and of course United States history, because the outcome of that, Texas ended up being all the way up into New Mexico and Colorado, and if that had gone the other way at San Jacinto, you know, I don't know what it'd be, but this is a come and take it guy from the Battle of Gonzales. The McDougal family paid for this. They were the sponsors. They paid for this site, and Fane and Janie McDougal. And this is very interesting. The Battle of Gonzales was very small. There was only, I don't know, 20 or 30 people or so, or a handful of people in that battle wasn't very big. But each of them, Vane and Janie, each had an ancestor that was at that battle. And so it's very special to them. They're from Gonzales. So one of the things about this site out here is at this dedication we had reenactors from the Texas Revolution. They came out in their garb and looked kind of like this guy, and they had a cannon. They fired that cannon off. But one of the things they did was they had a dedication of the site, and there several people had gone around and collected little samples of soil with permission from various historic sites: San Jacinto, Goliad, Washington on the Brazos, Alamo, and one other, and I can't think, Gonzales. Those 5 sites. So they had these little cups of soil. The only place in the world where all that soil is commingled, well, let me backtrack, there's one other site, but the only place recognized is here, where they came and one by one came out and poured that soil, and this is in honor of those that died at the Alamo or Goliad or San Jacinto. The only other site, and it's not really official, but some of it spilled around my barbecue stand out by my garage there. It was spillage, when you're mixing it up. Okay, so this is Come and Take It, Jane and Fame McDougal. Mexican War. Okay, how's the Marine Corps hymn go? All right, you passed that test. This one's named Halls of Montezuma. It was dedicated on the anniversary of the Battle of Chapultepec Castle in Mexico City. And so that's where that line in the Marine Corps comes from. And so this depicts a Marine doing what Marines do, breaking down the wall, jumping over the wall, got his bayonet, and he's fixing to go do business. And great ceremony here. We had the former Commandant of the Marine Corps give the remarks, wonderful speech, and a very interesting sight. Civil War. Probably this is many people's most favorite site out there. It's the largest site by area, and of course it's so significant in U.S. history. There were more casualties in the Civil War than all the other wars we fought in combined. Now, when you stop and think about that, World War II, World War I, all the wars combined, there were more casualties in the Civil War than all those other ones combined. And the country, of course, was much smaller back then. Civil War's got 2 sites. It's got the Union site, and how many of you got Union ancestors? All right. How many of you got Union ancestors but don't want to admit it? Okay, well, I had, I think, 3 or 4 great-grandfathers that were in the Union Army in various places. So this is a Union guy. He's going home. And that's the significance of this site. The title is Going Home. And it was dedicated on the anniversary of the Battle of Appomattox, on the 150th anniversary. And that was on purpose. Because the focus is it's over. The battle, this horrific war has taken place. It's over. Now they're going home to uncertain lives, but a United States. So this guy, he's walking north, and he stopped. He's looking. Well, what's he looking at? He's looking at this other guy over here on the other side of that fence. And you can't see it, but that Union guy, he's on the other side of that picket fence there. And there, you go out, when you go to that site, what you want to do is go and stand by that statue and look across the fence the way they're looking. Either one of them, they're looking straight at each other, their eyes are locked in. This is the Confederate statue. And it's a Texas Confederate statue, and that makes a difference because they had different uniforms. He's got a big hat, he's got a Lone Star for his buttons, they're a star. He does have a CS belt buckle. And he's got his gear. He's got a dance revolver, which was made down here at Anderson, and earlier in that down at West Columbia by the Dance brothers, who were my wife's ancestors. So her ancestors were in Confederate, mine were in the Union, and that's probably a pretty common thing if you look back. So they're going home. They see each other. They don't like each other, but it's over. They're on the way home. We had reenactors from Confederate reenactors, Union reenactors. We had 3 cannons out there firing away every so often, old Civil War cannons. And then we had the symphony orchestra string quintet was playing Civil War era tunes, and great speaker. And it was a wonderful ceremony, and it was one of recognition, but it was one of healing also. And I like to tell people we're probably the last city in the world that's putting up a Confederate statue instead of taking them down. But ours is different, and ours is not a general or something up on a pedestal or anything like that. Ours is the one that went and did his duty for his country. And as I said earlier, by act of Congress, the Confederate veterans are recognized as U.S. veterans. So, going home, that guy, we call him Ray. Anybody go to A&M Methodist Church? Well, Ray James was the model for this. He was one of the Confederate reenactors. So I tell Ray, I said, hey, you got your statue out there. Spanish-American War, a lot of people don't really think much about that one either. What about Spanish-American War? Well, that was a significant thing in American history. That war, for whatever reason it started, of course, it was down in Cuba. Teddy Roosevelt and the Rough Riders that really didn't ride. They didn't have horses. They walked up San Juan Hill. But that war changed American history in several ways. Number one, after that war, America became a superpower for the first time, and it acquired various territories. And one of those that it acquired was the Philippines, out in the Philippines, among other things. Because the American fleet defeated the Spanish fleet in the Battle of Manila Bay. And up until that time, the Spanish fleet was the world-dominating fleet. So that's where American history and world history changed. Well, this statue's Rough Rider. He's got his gear on there, and you'll note that some of these later statues, Payne, Laura figured out a way to put patina on these things and bring color to life and really makes them stand out. He's got his old cartridge belt, broad rim hat. He's got his roll around his chest there and his bayonet and canteen. And he's got his 30-40 Craig rifle, which is the first U.S. bolt-action rifle and military rifle, and kind of an interesting gun. So this guy's located on the what we call the west entrance to the memorial over by the softball fields, and he and his compadre, Sentry, and you see in the background's the Civil War site, and the Rough Riders just to the left out of the picture, but they both have the same uniforms, same identical uniforms, because it happened at the same time. The Philippine insurrection was a result of the Spanish-American War. We got troops over there, and now the locals are getting unhappy, and so there's an insurrection and things occur, and so they had the same uniforms there. And I call these guys the greeters at the west entrance to the memorial, because you walk up from the parking lot, you got this guy on your right, and the other guy's on the left, and they're both standing there with their Craig rifles, and they're kind of greeting you, warning you, behave yourself. Then I'm going to go over to World War I. This is over the top. Trench war, horrible, horrible condition. Tried to recreate that in some way. Didn't want to dig a hole because that'd fill up with water and mud. But so we recreated this, and I've got to give credit to my friend, classmate, Booz and B member, also at A&M, Wick McKean, Jacody Construction, because he and his company donated a lot of work to put these together, install these statues, and help build this stuff. So this shows the deal here is called Over the Top, and I like to call it informal name is No, You Go First, and so you got one guy, he's covering, he said, yeah, you go first, and this other guy said, all right. So he's going over the top, do the bloody work there. We dedicated that on the 100th anniversary of World War I armistice, which is November the 11th at 11 o'clock. World War II site, this is a site that's got 3 statues. We've got a naval pilot, Rose of the River, and a Army soldier. The naval pilot is representing the Pacific Theater. It's George Bush. With permission, he was used as the likeness. Of course, all of you know the story, and he flew there off the carriers in the Pacific, and that was a horrific way to, all of it's horrific, but being a naval pilot out there in those days was risky stuff. Rose of the River, it's one of the best dedications we ever had was for this. The Daughters of American Revolution local chapters. How many DAR do we have out here? All right, well, thank you to all the DAR, because they paid for this one. They put this together and organized it and were the leaders on this one. We had a dedication, the best one we ever had, in my opinion. We had some great dedication. But this one was different. Most of them are somber. They're remembering all these things that happened. This one was upbeat. We had DAR hierarchy that was the speaker, but we also, this is one of the original Rosies. She'd actually worked in one of the plants during the war, and she was there with another one, and it was miserable cold. You were there. Matter of fact, it snowed that night. And this particular statue, we didn't get it done until late the night before. We were out there in the dark with flashlights with Jacody putting this thing in the concrete and setting it up and what have you. But anyway, we had the band there that was playing the 40s swing music. We had a dance group that was young people that were dressed up in the 40s gear. The ladies had all their hair fixed up and makeup, and I mean, it was fantastic. Playing the music, doing the dances, and that's the only one we've ever had a dance out there, so it was great. Rose of the Riveter. And any of you that know history knows that one of the main reasons that we prevailed was the home front, because a lot of times our equipment wasn't the best, but we could build more ships, tanks, airplanes, rifles, everything, than the enemy could shoot it down, sink it, or blow it up. And that's literally the truth. And as one German said in a book I just finished reading, he said, our German tanks, one of our German tanks is equal to 10 of your U.S. tanks, but you have 11. And that summed that whole thing up, the home front. European theater is represented by this guy. It's Letter from Home. And many of you know this fellow, or knew him. This is Mr. C.J. Allen. And the Allen family paid for this. Allen Honda, and before that, Allen Oldsmobile, and what have you. And he's reading a letter from home that his father wrote. Now, you go out to that site, you walk around, and of course, this is taken the day after that Rose of the Riveter. The next day, went out there, and so that's what it did. It snowed, but you can read that letter. You clean it off, and it's engraved in the bronze, the letter that his father wrote him. And back then, a letter from home was gold. You didn't have computers and iPhones and everything. You got it. Maybe you get it something in the mail. So letter home was very specific, and that's represented here. Korean War. This one's pretty neat. 2 statues, one Korean, one U.S. This is entitled We Go Together, or Katsi Kapsi Dai in Korean. That's the only thing I know in Korean. And the premise was our board president, Lieutenant General Randy House, retired. Randy's he's a great guy, and he was commander out there in the Korean area, not during the war, but afterwards. And so he knew a lot of these Korean people, including their guy that the Koreans regard as their George Washington, General Pak, and 4-star general. Well, we posed the question, if the Koreans would pay for the American statue, we'd pay for the Korean statue, and they readily agreed. Some of these prominent Korean businessmen that General House had known. And so they did. They raised all the funds for that for the U.S. statue. We paid for the Korean statue. And when I say we, the city of College Station, city of Bryan, Brazos County have always been our primary benefactors on those statues. So we took that and we developed this site because in the Korean War it was a joint effort, of course, and there were integrated units. A tank crew might have 4 people in it. One would be a Korean, 3 Americans, or 3 Koreans and 1 American, etc. So they were integrated like that for communications and being able to help the maneuvers and what have you. One of the things that we did on this, another great ceremony, we had the General Pack in his 90s, suffering from cancer, came over, and he attended this, and he spoke quite eloquently. And several of those prominent Korean businessmen came over, and the Korean national news media came, and they reported on that at this little site from College Station back in the national news in Korea. But there were also about 20 or so Korean officers that were going to grad school at A&M, and they came in their uniforms, Army, Navy, Air Force. And one of the things we asked those Koreans to do, we'd kind of learned this from the Texas Revolution site, we said, hey, when you come over, can you bring some little rocks, little stones? They said, okay. So they did. They brought a bunch of these little rocks. And Koreans are referred to a lot of times as rocks because it's Republic of Korea. And they're tough people. But anyway, so they did. So at one point in that ceremony, we had Korean music playing and all these things. They had those current Korean officers in uniform come up, and each one had one of those little rocks. And they walked up to where the podium was and then tossed that rock out on the site. So this site out there has part of Korea scattered around there. Now, I can't tell you which ones they are, but out there somewhere, there are some part of Koreas in that site. Vietnam, we had a great ceremony. The speaker was the Vietnam Helicopter Pilots Association president. I didn't even know there was such a thing, but there is. And he came down from up north somewhere and he spoke. We had, I don't know, 300 or 400 people out there, I think. And we had, it wasn't a very big site either. It was packed. But as he said to me earlier, he said, that's me. I was the guy that was jumping out that helicopter. And the name of this is Hot LZ. And what that means is that's the landing zone. That means that helicopter's coming in and they're getting shot at. So the guy that's flying the helicopter, he's in a big hurry. And the guys that are in the helicopter, they're in a big hurry. So they got a kind of a joint, I guess, everybody's kind of wanting to do the same thing, get in, get out of there or whatever. But very hard way to do business. So Vietnam was in many ways a helicopter war. The speaker was describing this, how that evolved and how it enhanced the maneuvers, and you could transport people very quickly into battle and evacuate and all these kind of things that those helicopters would do, and there was just thousands of them. But that particular helicopter is a UH-1, a Huey, and the Hueys had a single blade rotor. The new helicopters, they have 4 blades, but most of them. But these had the single blade, and they were very distinct sound. It was a very, what they call a whop, 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 and you could hear that thing coming for miles, particularly on a humid day. You could hear it, and there was no mistaking what it was. Well, right when he was describing this in his talk, guess what you heard? What is that? And so some members of the board, we've got several members that were helicopter pilots in Vietnam, Jim Singleton, Randy House, and of course other Vietnam veterans on our board, had found a restored Huey. It was a Marine version, and I think it was out of Conroe or a local area, and paid to have that guy come in. Well, he came in, and it was right on cue. They had it all worked out with radios. He came in right on cue when when the speaker was describing the sound this thing made, and sure enough, and I don't know, he wasn't 200 feet high maybe. I don't even know he was that high. He was low. And he was coming in low and fast, and he turned that helicopter on its side and did a complete circle of the site.
Wow.
And then jumped over and landed right on the soccer field.
Wow.
And there wasn't a dry eye in the crowd at that point, because that brought back all the memories and emphasized what the talk was about. Great ceremony. So this site's Vietnam War. I'll mention one of the authors of this panel was a friend of mine, Jim Wilbanks, class 69. He was in D2, but that's all right. And he went on to become a history professor up at Fort Leavenworth at the Command and General Staff College. He's written 3 of the panels out there. But if you want to read books about the Vietnam War, Jim Wilbanks has written many of them, and including the other book he wrote was a General Hollingsworth story. But Jim was a Silver Star recipient at the Battle of Van Lock, which was a horrible, horrible deal in '72. And so if you want to, and I'm going to give you some other books to read about, but if you want to read about some of the Vietnam stuff, Jim Wilbanks. That's Johnny Velasquez there. He's another member of our board. He was the model. He was infantry in Vietnam. Gulf War, Desert Storm. This was the last one we dedicated. Of course, it was desert, so we've got this guy, and he's a tank commander. He's dismounted. He's motioning, okay, we need to go this direction. War on Terror, 2001 to 2021. This represents the attack that happened on that date, September 11th. And the beam that you see there came out of one of the World Trade Centers. And you can see, if you go out there and look at it, this is one of the most emotional sites out there. And you can see that beam's all bent and burnt and twisted and damaged. But what does it resemble when you look at it? Cross. And I don't know if that was intended or not, but that's what it certainly looks like, and it's appropriate. These are the last statues we dedicated, and on September 11th. And this is these 2 statues are known as Never Forget, and they represent first responders, firefighters, law enforcement. And one of the things we try to do is keep where we can have a personal, local interest in our sites. Just as Linda mentioned, we use photographs of local people wherever we could and that kind of thing. In this case, the fireman there is Lieutenant Pickard of the Bryan Fire Department that died in the Sons of Herman fire several years ago. And then standing beside him with his hand on his shoulder is Brian Bachman, the constable that was killed in line of duty over on the south side. So those represent all law enforcement and firefighters that died on September 11th and any other time. And so they're remembered here, and the name of this is Never Forget. And those 2 statues are facing towards that beam. They're looking at that beam. Behind them is this guy. His title is Never Again. He represents all special operations, soldiers, sailors, Marines, airmen. And he's got his gear on, he's got a machine gun there. He's ready to go out and take care of those that want to do harm to us. He's facing away from that beam. So he has got their back, so to speak. He's facing outward, they're facing inward. Never forget, never again. We still got 4 to do. Our goal is July 4th, 2026, which is the 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence. China Relief Expedition, Mexican Border Service, Expeditionary Operations, and Kosovo. Kosovo is going to be the next statue that's underway now. It will be a Air Force pilot in their flight suit, in her flight suit. It will be a female pilot, and that is intentional because that's the first time to our knowledge that females flew in combat. And so that's what how we're representing that one. We're also got a project that you probably heard about, honors all the unknown soldiers, and this is another, DAR is heavily involved in this, as is SAR, Garden Club, Architecture Department, Master Gardeners, and it's to represent, it's going to have a representation of the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier in Washington, D.C. Not an exact one, but a representation of that image. And it'll be located right there along the trail as you first go in with a granite marker. And this is called the Never Forget Garden. They are in the process of raising funds for this. Sherry, we got to recognize Sherry. But they are an incredible group. They're, as of a week or so ago, they're now well over halfway, $120,000, and got enough money now to pay for the granite, pay for the design. The design is pretty much complete, and we hope to, I guess right now we're looking at maybe next November to try to get this completed and dedicated.
Mention the pavers.
And the pavers, yes. You too can be part of this project. Anybody wants to help, they still need more money. And if you come talk to Sherry, she can tell how you can do that. And for certain contributions, you can be listed on a paver that will be around the perimeter of that foundation there. A very great project, and I hope you would be willing to do that. Or if you've got a group that wants to do that, even better. But Never Forget Garden, that's the one that's right now that's, we're really trying to get across the finish line on that, and thanks to Sherry and all the other people that are involved with that incredible project. We had, I say you're invited, these are three ceremonies we just had this year. Of course, the September 11th, the great ceremony, we dedicated those statues. Wayne Dickey was our speaker. The Never Forget Garden Project, walk, run, we did walk. There were some runners. It was a fundraiser, and it was a great event. We had the ceremony last Friday. It was cold, cold, cold. And 173 new names were called out. Gary Blair was our speaker. That was intentional. Gary is a Marine, and everybody knows him as a basketball coach, but he was a Marine before he was a basketball coach, and he gave a very emotional and a wonderful talk. He's a great friend of our Veterans Memorial. So that's the website, and as I said, there's a test. All right, it's a pretty easy test though. When is the deadline to put the name on the wall?
August 15th.
All right, good, very good, outstanding. Okay, now the homework. Number one, go out to the memorial and walk the trail. Number two, tell somebody about it and hopefully take them with you, because we want to spread the word about this memorial. A lot of people don't even know it's here. So go out there, take somebody there. Number three, put a name of a friend or family member on the wall. Remember them that way. And then number four, we're in Larry Ringer Library, so I would be remiss if I didn't tell you to read a book.